What are the significant repercussions that can come from not correctly classifying contractors or employees? On the edge of your seat? Find out in this week's episode. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Conscious Counsel podcast with your host, Corey Sterling. What's up? That's me. I'm so happy that you are joining me and that I get to share some super fun legal information for you and tell you stories from my email inbox of what it's like being a lawyer for health and wellness entrepreneurs. As always, my promise and my commitment to you is give you fun and informative information that's going to help you protect and grow your wellness business with confidence and clarity. That's what I care about. I got out of bed this morning and I was like, I'm going to share information with the world to help amazing health and wellness business owners protect and grow their wellness business with both confidence and clarity. So without further ado, let's jump into this week's episode. This week, I'm going to share a story and talk a little bit about the distinction between independent contractor and employee and why it's so important. And the reason why this matters for you is if you're growing your business and it's not just you and you are bringing on team members because you want to help more people or you want to fill your schedule or you want to do less work, whatever it is, you're going to need the support and help of other people in your health and wellness business in order to thrive and reach your goals and go to the levels that you'd like to go to. And how you hire them, how you classify them in the agreements that you have them sign will be very, very, very important in this process. So if we just zoom out for a moment and think a little bit about what the rules are or why any of this matters. When you hire someone, they're either going to be an independent contractor in the United States classified as a 1099, or they're going to be an employee, which is a W-2 in the United States. And there are very, very significant repercussions of how you classify your workers. And the reason why is the laws treat independent contractors differently than they treat employees. And also, you have to treat independent contractors differently than you treat employees. Now, as most things with the law, we know that this is not intuitive, right? You just think, oh, I'm hiring someone and I need to get them starting to work. So, okay, I don't really know the difference between a contractor and employee. So I'm just going to get them to sign a piece of paper or a document that ChatGPT drafted up for me, and we're on our way. However, this is not the case, and one of the most common problems that I run into in my legal practice is supporting clients who did not take the proper time to choose, to intelligently and strategically choose if they're going to have contractors or employees. And in the end, it ends up coming back to be a massive, massive headache and a problem, like the story that I'm going to tell you in a moment. But the things to know is that, again, the rules are different about how you treat employees and how you treat contractors. And the first thing to understand is that I get it that you want to have contractors. And that's because it's cheaper, it's simpler, it's easier to have contractors. That's just the way that it is. And most often, when I speak to small business owners who work in health and wellness, they'll just tell me that they have contractors, and I'll be like, okay, well, what makes them a contractor? And they'll say, oh, well, I just call them contractors, they're not employees. And I understand in a practical day-to-day basis, that makes a lot of sense. Legally, it doesn't make any sense. And there has been a trend over the last couple of years to categorize workers. The government is coming after businesses who categorize workers as contractors when you really treat them like employees. And the first thing to know, there's two basic legal principles that you have to understand. Firstly, in the United States, and this does not apply to Canada, but in the United States, whether or not someone is a contractor or employee will usually be determined by a state test. And it's important to know that, firstly, if someone's working for you in the course of business that you offer, i.e. you're a yoga studio and you're hiring yoga teachers, in some states, automatically that person's going to be an employee, okay? So that's the first thing to know, that in the United States, it's state specific. In Canada, it's a federal question. And in the states where it's not mandated that someone who's carrying out the core service of the business is an employee, so there's a chance, it's always going to come down to a control test. And this is something in Canada and the United States that's similar. And control basically means how much control does the business have over the way the services are being provided. And that's the big thing to look at. I mean, we could go on into all of the specifics, but I don't want to do that today. I just want to put the seed into your mind that you understand, okay, well, what really matters is how are the services performed? How much control do I have over that? And am I satisfying the necessary requirements to have this person actually be a contractor and not an employee, which is most of the time what my clients will want. Now, the next thing to know is just because you get someone to sign a contract that says something like, oh, sign this contractor agreement. Look, we're contractors. They sign this. That's not going to apply. And in the event that there's an issue, it's always going to come down to the substantive element of the work. A signed contract is one variable that would be looked at, but it's usually going to be things like, does the worker get to make their own schedule? Do you force them to do things in a certain way? Are they allowed to work at other places? Do they send you an invoice before they get paid? These are all of the variables that the government is going to look at in determining whether or not you actually have contractors or employees. And now we have a general idea about, okay, there's a distinction between employees and contractors. And in some states, automatically in your industry, someone's going to be an employee, which means that you should follow that and do it correctly because you don't want to get audited. And I've been through that, and I'll talk about audits in a second. But if they're contractors, then you want to make sure that you are not controlling the services in the way that they perform them. Now, the biggest risks about misclassifying your workers is one, a potential audit. And early in my career, I had a client who ran a studio that went out of business because they had been operating for years, calling everyone a contractor, treating them like employees. They got audited. They were found the agreements didn't support them. The way the actual services provided did not support them. They got a bill for hundreds of thousands of dollars and they closed their doors. The situation sucked. The client also had taken out personal loans from their family to operate the studio, and they lost everything. And that was really, really sad. So that's why I share these stories and explain a little bit about why this is important. But what I see more practically, I think audits happen in a very small percentage of situations. The bigger issue that I see come up around misclassification is when you start having problems with your staff. And when your staff want to take control of the situation, there's some disagreement, they want to open their own space, they don't want to follow your rules, they turn other staff in your business against you. I've seen all of this happen. And then you say, okay, well, cool, you're out of here. Like, you're gone. This is unacceptable behavior. And they're like, well, actually, I've worked here for 3 years and you've been treating me like a contractor the whole time. And, if you don't give me what I want, then I'm going to report your business. I'm going to call the IRS or the CRA, or I'm going to, make a whole big problem about how you've actually been treating me like an employee, but calling me a contractor. And this is very, very real. And this is something that I've seen come up many, many times, unfortunately, for a lot of business owners. And so the story that I want to share that sucks and is not a fun story, and something that I recently went through, had to do with a studio owner who had someone on their team who was causing a lot of problems, a lot of issues, and they wanted to fire them. And they sent me, hey, Corey, how do I get rid of this person? I'm going through this problem. The first thing I did was I got them in a Conscious Counsel Plus membership. I was like, look, we're going to need to do a whole bunch of work on this. I want to give you unlimited access to working with me. Sign up as a member. I'm on your team. I'm on your side. We're going to make it work. Now, after we did that, and now I'm retained and I can spend all my time, as much time as required to see this through, I started looking at the situation and I say to the client, okay, send me over the signed agreement and explain to me, you got to be honest with me, explain to me exactly what they were doing and how they were doing it. And it was clear they didn't consult me before they hired the person. They didn't hire Conscious Counsel to do the contractor agreement. The reality is they were treating this person like an employee, but calling them a contractor for years. And, going back to the adage, pay me now or pay me later, I was like, look, I wish before you did this, you would have told me what was going on so I could have directed you. We're here now. Now we have to come to a settlement with this person. And it's such a frustrating and sad situation because as a studio owner and a small business owner in health and wellness, you work so hard for your business. You spend so much time trying to get clients, making sure the clients are satisfied, building a team, building a culture, renting the space, doing marketing. It's like we wear all of these different hats. And in this situation, it was just so sad for me that my client never really put time or attention into understanding whether or not the person and the scope of services that they hired their worker for made them a contractor or an employee. And in this particular situation, like, they were very upset. They felt offended. They felt violated. They felt disrespected. All of those emotions that I see clients go through in situations like this, all of them are real and all of them are happening. And they really, really don't want to pay the worker. They're sort of like, I gave you a job. Now you're trying to hijack the situation and hold me hostage. The last thing I want to do is give you a penny. I don't want to give you one penny for all of this. I want you out of my business. I want you gone. But if the other person has leverage and has a stronger legal position, then legally that's what we're at. And as a lawyer, when it comes to supporting clients and getting results for clients that they want and that they need, the first thing's always going to be, what is the legal position? And the legal position is always going to be determined by what was the signed agreement between the parties, and are we following the rules and are we doing things correctly? And in this case, my client was not following the rules correctly, did not have the appropriate documentation in place, and in fact was treating their contractor like an employee because of the scope of services that were being provided, not receiving invoices, telling them exactly what they had to do over a period of years. And now we had to negotiate and settle with this worker. And it sucked. It sucked for everyone, because all I want is for my clients to thrive and not have to deal with this. And what I see is it's moments like this that get studio owners or small business owners in health and wellness, it discourages them from continuing their business. And you're so angry, you're so upset, and now you have to pay this person thousands of dollars because things weren't set up properly from the beginning. So that's the situation. We were able to resolve it. It's fine. My client has moved past it, but also it's just very, very upsetting and sad. And I wish it didn't happen this way, but sometimes it does. So just a little summary of this episode. If you have people who work for you, they're either a contractor or an employee, it's firstly going to be state specific to understand what they're doing and if that makes them an employee or a contractor. If you're going to have them as a contractor, you need to make sure you're following the appropriate legal tests, and the way the services are provided demonstrate that. When it comes to a written agreement or the risks of not having the appropriate written agreement in place, you run a risk of getting audited, which can sink your business. And I've seen that happen before. And also you lose control of a legal situation because you're not following the rules properly. And that's the last thing that I want for anyone who's listening to this. And again, the way to address this appropriately is to make sure that you have the right agreements in place and that you're following the rules and that you're working with industry-specific lawyers so that you can avoid this situation. And so that's this week's story. That's what came up in my email inbox and a situation that I had to deal with. I share it with you because I want you to have confidence and clarity in operating your business. And I also don't want you to make the same mistakes that some of my other clients made. So that's all of the information for you. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you love the episode and you love the podcast, you can always just hit the subscribe button. We got some really fun and exciting things coming out that we're just going to be sharing exclusively on the podcast. And always feel free to follow us on Instagram at Conscious Counsel. And whatever it is that you do, wherever you are in the world, whatever's going on in your life, I just have one thing to ask of you. Make sure that you are working with a lawyer who loves you. Have a wonderful week. Thanks for listening.